All right. So I have your model as a GLB file. We're going to start there and like
Okay.
literally do it from scratch. Um, and this is kind of this. There's not really because Blender is always changing. There's not much documentation out there on this process. So
Mm.
uh, you're getting something that's you know no one else has. So we're inventing this as we go along. So I'm going to do what I did in class last week or the week before or I guess it was last week, where we turn on the GLB plugin. I'm just using a junk project that I have on my computer. It doesn't really. I'm going to start from scratch.
Yep.
Um, and if all else fails, I can always send you this so you can use it yourself.
Oh
But
yeah.
we can. So we're just going to look for the GL TF importer, right?
Yep.
Even though it's a GLB, GLB, GLTF are all of the same family of file extensions. So now we should be able to take Bob and import him in and see where I have Bob. Bob is. So I'm going to start from scratch with just Bob. All right. So we're going to put all our stuff in assets. Then skeletal meshes. And one thing I discovered this morning is I don't actually have to make a folder for Bob because when I import the GLB file, it automatically makes a folder for Bob. So uh, here he is. He
Mm-hmm.
goes in. I don't have to worry about any of these settings. Doesn't matter to me. And then I don't care about these are warnings. And then I don't need the meshes because they're not skeletal meshes, so I can delete those immediately. But what we have here, as we saw in class, is we have these materials that are all nicely put together, and each one is like a different way they're made based on like it has the transparency for the glasses, and it's actually a much better way of importing it in than by bringing in the FBX in the first place. Then we now need to get the Bob into mix mode for the T pose. So I have Blender here. I'm gonna start from scratch. I'm gonna bring in Bob
Mm-hmm.
from the downloads. Same file. There he is. And I don't really care about materials anymore because materials are already in the project, right? He does have materials, but when I export it, I'm not even going to worry about it. In fact, it'll upload to Mixamo quicker without having to bring in the texture files.
Mm-hmm.
So all we're doing here is exporting it, and then we need to pay attention to the settings we're doing. I'm going to put it back in my downloads. I'm going to call this Bob for Mix. And then the settings, I'm not worried about the textures. Scale's all fine. Geometry, I want to make sure I'm saying smoothing face, and then I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
apply modifiers. If you look at the face, um, there's like the head. If I
Yep.
select the head and I go down to here to blend shapes, you see it has these things. They're called shape keys here, but they're called blend shapes in Maya. If I move them,
Mm-hmm.
see how it's moving the face?
Oh.
These are modifiers, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to apply them. I want to keep them as variables. So that's why I'm taking off apply modifiers. Right? If I wanted to pose his face, I would say apply modifiers. But we want to use it for a game engine, so we're not doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to add any extra bones. I don't know why that's a default
Okay.
setting. And then we have no animation. So those are the things that we should do. Make sure that we make smoothing to face, turn off apply modifiers, and turn off add leaf bones, and turn off bake animation. There is an animation, so it doesn't really matter. And so
Okay.
I'm going to now export this to my downloads, and then I'm going to find Mixamo. And this is a little secret I also learned this week. If you log out
Mm-hmm.
and make sure you're logging in fresh,
Yeah.
and then you bring in upload a character. And see, it uploads much quicker without the textures.
Mm-hmm.
I don't actually have to apply a T-pose. It automatically puts it into a T-pose. So I'm going to say next. And then without looking for the animation, I'm just going to say download, and it says, oh, how do you want to pose it? So instead of adding a T-pose animation like your file had, it just makes it a
Oh.
T-pose. It changes the way
Mm-hmm.
it looks. And so that was one thing I definitely
Oh,
wanted to
that's
address.
why.
Yeah, that's
Oh.
and that wasn't very clear because when I do this, I'm always kind of fumbling because it's always kind of, somewhat different. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that was something I definitely wanted to point out. So now I
Mm-hmm.
have Bob for Mixes here. Bob for Mixes actually can go inside of Unreal, so I'm going to rename it Bob, so it just is the right name. Cool. Oh, we've already got some Bobs in here. Let's get rid of some of these Bobs. So now I'll rename it Bob. And there we go. Now I don't have a skeleton I want to apply it to because I'm going to bring in the skeleton. So I'm going to import it is a skeleton mesh, and I want to bring in the mesh. And now some other settings. And sometimes you get warnings if you don't say use frame 0. We want to use frame 0, which is going to be the T-pose, right? That's the reference pose. And then those, this isn't as important for this week, but for when we do face tracking in 2 weeks, we want to make sure we bring in those face targets. Say import. And let's take a look. All right, we don't need these materials because we already have them from the GLB import. And we open up Bob, and Bob's in the T-pose, which is good. It's not the end of the world if he's not in a T-pose, but we're just trying to keep ourselves as, make it as clean as possible. So because I include the morph targets, I can now do this in Unreal 2.
Mm-hmm.
And we do face tracking in 2 weeks. This is all the AR kit names for how to move a face around. So what's cool about the GLB import is that it gives the materials the same. You see how these are called element 0, 1, 2? It's also named them with the same numbers, right? So there, import it in, or I can drag it. That didn't seem to work. There it goes. There it goes. Cool. And yeah, the glasses look much better this way than having to do it from scratch. There we go. Bob's looking great. Okay, save Bob. Now let's go back to Blender. Boink. And we need to get the Bob with the T-pose in here. So let's just clear out the scene. And then bring in FBX from my downloads. And there's Bob from just 3 minutes ago. And then when I import it, I'm going to say there is no animation. And I want to make sure that the bones are automatically oriented correctly. It's something that Blender does. But so those are the 2 things I did. I said don't need any animation and automatic bone orientation. The animation thing wouldn't have made a difference, but I'm just doing it to be just explaining why it's there. All right. Well, maybe I do need the animation because he's not in a T-pose. Let's try that again. So many settings, so many little checkboxes.
Yeah.
Bob, we'll include animation, but we'll do automatic bone orientation. Let's see if that works. There we go. So we want the animation. Okay. So this is it. But as we learned in class, it's still not the rest pose. It's just the pose position. So what we're going to do is, this is like a null. I don't even know what this is. It's just extra junk. So I'm just going to delete that. All right, so here's our skeleton. We have the mesh. If we want, we don't even have to use the mesh. We can delete it right now because we already have the mesh imported into Unreal. But it could be helpful for visualization. So let's make it so that we can make the rest pose be a T-pose. So I'm going to go to Object, Convert, Mesh, and no longer this mesh is no longer attached to the skeleton. It's it's not bound to the it has no weight mapping. I'm gonna change my settings so I can see my bones in front. There you go. And then when I come to the bones, I'm gonna change it to pose mode because that's how you edit bones. And I'm gonna say pose, apply, rest pose. Now when I go to rest pose, it is the T pose.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's put the mesh back on it, just for visual reference. So I think I go back to object. Sorry, select the objects and then select armature last. And then say parent armature deform. Cool. So now if we move the bones around, it'll move the mesh. Cool. So let's import the BVH file. Motion capture. Downloads. We'll do human 1. And then because it's extra large, we're going to actually make it 0.01 here. And then I want to make sure that I change the duration of the timeline so I can see the full animation. Import that in. That never happened before. Let's see. Armature. Okay, rest pose is still fine. Cool. And then the animation here is just this layer 0 thing for the T-pose. Let's see if I can actually delete this. Now I'm kind of guessing. Okay. We don't need any more because the rest pose is set. And that cleans up some of those extra animation files. This animation file is called Beach Walking Human 01. We can keep it that name. We can rename it. All right, so this is Beach Human. Cool. And let's just do the Rococo thing real quick. So we're going to say the source, the animation's there. The target's right there. Build the bone list. Check to make sure that the arms are right. Yes, shoulder, arm, arm, arm. That looks good. We're going to retarget from the rest pose. It's thinking. And now you've seen it's added this beach human retarget animation to our armature.
Yeah.
And we have the full duration. If we pull this slider over, we have the full duration of the take. Cool. We no longer need this. Just to confirm. Yep, still working. If we want to rename the animation here, we can. And then we're ready to export. So I'll export FBX. And then let's look at our settings again. We want to, we don't care about geometry. We've already imported geometry. We don't want to add leaf bones because we want the bones to match the one we've already put in there. And then yes, we're going to bake our animation. So make sure we take off this. I don't know why it does, but it by default wants to add little tiny bones at the very end. I'm sure there's some animation reason why, but we don't care. We're going to call this Beach Human, or whatever we want to. And then it's going to bake the animation. Give it a second.
I have a quick question. Would it be possible to like apply those motion captures to like to any characters at the
Yes.
same time, or yeah?
You want to apply motion capture to mini characters?
Yeah, like there's a Bob and then there's another like girl. So like they're a couple and then they're walking on the beach.
Yes.
So I was trying earlier, like yesterday, like I was trying to like apply 2 different motion captures to the separate characters at the same time, but then like it seems like it didn't kind of work.
That would be fine in Blender, but you only want to import one FBX at a time into Unreal.
Right. Right. That's
So you
okay.
have to make sure that when
Very
you're
good.
exporting the FBX, you're going to make sure that you select the armature, and when you export the FBX,
yeah. And then, yeah.
You have to make sure you're saying only the selected objects.
Mm,
But I don't trust that, so I try to do it a little cleaner.
mhm.
And then so this is good with Blender. Let's bring in the beach human into Unreal. Let's go back up a level to Bob. And then see it sees the skeleton, so we want to apply it to the skeleton. We don't want another mesh. And then it knows that it's just an animation that we're bringing in. So we say import. And for reasons that I don't know, Blender will give me this weird one, and then the one I want. And that's just me not knowing enough about Blender to know why it's doing that. But we have the one we want. You delete this one. And there we are. So I will stop the recording to keep it